Imagine back to when you were a child. You were small, innocent, and entirely unaware of the complex, invisible machinery of social expectations controlling this fragile earth. In those days, everything seemed happier. The world was quieter, less demanding, and far less taxing. You existed simply to exist, completely untethered from the judgments of others. That is, until someone shattered that illusion.
It usually happens in a single, quiet moment. Someone says something about how the world actually works, a harsh rule, an unspoken social hierarchy, or a standard you didn't know you had to meet. It is a revelation that permanently alters your perspective. Suddenly, you are thrown into a civil war within your own mind. On one side is your internal reluctance, a voice telling you that this new reality feels wrong, artificial, and unjust. On the other side is an overwhelming, biological desire to fit in. One part of you wants to obey, just to belong, to wear the mask and survive. But another part questions. You want to know more. You need to understand why things are the way they are. Yet, when you dare to ask, you are met with the most dismissive, hollow response human beings have ever designed. That's just how it is. That's how it's always been. Perhaps your younger self tried to accept it. You tried to view it as an ordinary part of growing up. Nothing more, nothing less. Yet, a nagging sensation remained. Something stood out like a sore thumb, even if you couldn't quite put your finger on it. Maybe it was how others acted around you. Or perhaps it was your refusal to accept societal scripts at face value. But when you spoke up, the world did what it always does to those who question. It rejected you. People called you crazy, overly sensitive, or weird for viewing life through such a lens. It left you deeply discouraged, wandering through school hallways, wondering why everyone blindly mirrored the same robotic mannerisms as the last 100 people you passed on the street.
And then you met someone who challenged your entire perspective on existence. They changed the way you viewed people, goals, and social status. For the first time, something inside you felt validated. You felt seen, a feeling so rare in adolescence that it borders on the miraculous. You felt a genuine connection, as if someone were finally listening without an agenda, seeing your true self beneath the armor you had built. Yet your instinct wasn't to embrace them. Your instinct was fear. It was easier to reject the idea that someone actually cared to listen. You assumed they were playing a game. You thought they were only being nice to get something, to manipulate you, or to warp your mind. In a world of transactions, unconditional presence feels like a trap. But their pace and the lingering residue of the conversation you shared that day left a permanent mark on your mind. Their subtle ability to convey rich, intricate emotions through simple, quiet actions was deeply unsettling. This person received constant praise from those around them, yet they never seemed to chase it. Eventually, you pinpointed their secret. It was their ability to truly listen and their paradoxical power to fit in without ever conforming. They became the center of the room, not by shouting, but by being completely still.
To understand why this person is such an anomaly and why you feared them, we have to look at the terrifying psychology of the crowd. In the 1950s, psychologist Solomon Asch conducted a series of experiments that revealed the fragile nature of human independence. Imagine sitting in a room with 7 other people. The researcher holds up 2 cards. One has a single vertical line. The other has 3 lines, labeled A, B, and C. Your task is simple. State which of the 3 matches the single line in length. It is painfully obvious that the answer is C. But the other 7 people in the room are actors, and they've been instructed to unanimously lie. One by one, they confidently declare that the correct answer is B. When it is finally your turn, what do you say? In Asch's study, nearly 75% of participants conformed and gave the wrong answer at least once, just to avoid standing out. Even though their eyes told them one thing, the social pressure to fit in forced their mouths to say another. During post-experiment interviews, many admitted they knew they were lying, but they feared being ridiculed. But a few experienced something far more disturbing. Their brains had actually warped their visual perception. They didn't just pretend to agree. They had conformed so deeply that they actually saw the wrong line as the correct one. This is the psychological tax of being a teenager. Every hallway, every classroom, every unspoken dress code is a silent Asch experiment. We are constantly surrounded by actors telling us that the wrong line is the right one. We change our opinions, our tastes, and our values because standing alone in a room and saying C feels like social suicide. But why does it feel like social suicide? Why is the need to emulate so overpowering during these specific years of our lives? It's not a lack of willpower. It's hardware. During adolescence, the brain undergoes a massive remodeling phase. The prefrontal cortex, the logical, decision-making center, is still under construction. Meanwhile, the limbic system, which processes emotions and social rewards, goes into hyperdrive. When you deviate from the crowd, your brain registers it as a lethal threat. Modern neuroimaging studies have shown that when a teenager experiences social rejection or exclusion, the anterior cingulate cortex lights up. This is the exact same region of the brain that processes physical pain. To your adolescent brain, being called crazy for your beliefs doesn't just hurt your feelings. It registers as a physical injury. For our ancient ancestors, being cast out of the tribe meant starvation and death by predators. Conformity meant survival. So, when you choose to emulate an archetype, when you copy the popular kid, the athlete, the rebel, or the academic, you are not just trying to look cool. You are administering painkillers to your own brain. You are hacking your neurobiology to feel safe. This is what makes the non-conformer so deeply unsettling. When you look at someone who stands in the center, completely unbothered by the judgment of the tribe, you are looking at someone who has seemingly overridden their own biological software. They aren't in pain. And to a mind addicted to the safety of the crowd, that kind of independence
is terrifying. Because of this biological vulnerability, we fall prey to a cognitive phenomenon identified by psychologist David Elkind, the imaginary audience. During adolescence, we realize that other people have minds, thoughts, and judgments, but we make a critical egocentric error. We believe that everyone is thinking about us. When you walk down the hall, you feel a silent spotlight tracking your every move. You assume the crowd is constantly judging your clothes, your hair, the way you walk, the way you breathe. To survive this imaginary audience, we look for scripts. We look for archetypes to hide behind. This brings us to a concept pioneered by philosopher René Girard called mimetic desire. Girard argued that human beings do not know what to want on their own. We do not choose our desires independently. Instead, we copy the desires of others. We want the shoes, the status, the relationships, and the personality traits of the popular archetypes, not because those things are inherently valuable, but because others want them. We don't actually want to be ourselves. We want to emulate the successful copy of someone else. It is a hall of mirrors. You are imitating someone who is imitating someone else, who is imitating a magazine cover. If the Asch experiment and the imaginary audience were difficult in the 1950s, today they have been weaponized on a scale previously thought impossible. You aren't just trying to fit into a room of 7 people anymore. You are trying to fit into a digital panopticon of millions. The algorithm is an automated, high-speed Asch experiment. Every like, view, and comment is a digital actor telling you which line on the card is the right one. It accelerates mimetic desire by showing you exactly what the world values at this exact second. The archetypes have become hyper-specific and infinitely demanding. You must have the aesthetic morning routine, the flawless lighting, the cynical detachment, the perfectly curated personality. The pressure to emulate is no longer confined to school hours. It follows you into your bedroom, buzzing in your pocket while you try to sleep. In this environment, giving up your true self isn't just a temptation, it is the default setting of the modern world. You are actively incentivized to prune away the weird, questioning, and authentic parts of your soul until you fit the mold of a recognizable, consumable archetype. But when you met that non-conformer, the person who became the center, they broke this entire system. They were immune to the imaginary audience, both physical and digital. They didn't act as if they were on a stage. When they looked at you, they weren't checking their own reflection in your eyes. Because they didn't participate in this game of mimetic desire, they possessed a rare and magnetic currency: true presence. To understand why we fear this presence, we must turn to Carl Jung's concepts of the persona and the shadow. The persona is the social mask we wear to make a good impression on the world. It is the polite, curated, and conforming version of ourselves that we present to society. In our teenage years, our persona is all we have. It is our armor. We build it out of the archetypes we copy. But beneath that mask lies the shadow, the parts of ourselves we deem unacceptable, weird, or ugly, the doubts we suppress to fit in, The questions we stop asking because we were told that's just how it is. When you meet someone who has integrated their shadow, someone who is authentic, raw, and completely comfortable in their own skin, it acts as an unintentional spotlight. Their wholeness exposes your fragmentation.
When they look at you without judgment, your mind panics. Your psychological defense mechanisms flare up. You project your own deceit onto them. You think, they must have an angle. Nobody is this real. They are trying to warp my mind. We project our own fear of being exposed onto the only person who is actually willing to see us. It is easier to believe they are a threat than to admit that our own masks are suffocating us. This is the profound tragedy of teenage emulation. We desperately copy the external aesthetics of those we admire, hoping to catch a fraction of their internal peace. We buy their clothes, adopt their slang, and listen to their music. But emulation is just a refined form of hiding. You cannot copy someone else's peace of mind. You cannot wear another person's individuation like a leather jacket.
The secret of the person who became the center wasn't that they were born special. They weren't a genius, a mystic, or a superhero. Their secret was simpler and far more terrifying. They had stopped running from themselves. They looked at the social matrix. They felt the crushing weight of the crowd. They acknowledged the imaginary audience, and they chose to step off the stage. They realized that the spotlight they feared was just a projection of their own mind. They chose the pain of standing alone over the slow, agonizing death of pretending to be someone else. If you want to emulate the archetype of the non-conformer, you must stop copying them. You must stop looking for a new mask to wear. True emulation is not mimicry. It is integration. It is the willingness to look at the parts of yourself that don't fit the crowd's expectations, the weird questions, the quiet observations, the reluctance to accept the way things have always been, and decide that they are worth keeping.
The philosopher Alfred Adler believed that true freedom is simply the courage to be disliked. It is the recognition that you are not responsible for the crowd's reaction to your existence. To the teenager who feels that nagging sensation, who knows that something in the world's robotic mannerisms is fundamentally broken, do not bury that instinct. In a world where everyone is running as fast as they can to escape who they are, the person who stands perfectly still will always look like a giant. You don't need to fit in, and you don't need to fight to stand out. You just need to stop lying to yourself about what you see.